Good morning, precious friends. Pardon the lighting. Ugh, it's terrible. But anyway, it is what it is. I'm so sorry for the delay in getting to the recipes that I promised you for our homemade beef-based breakfast sausage and Italian sausage. Personal lifestyle issues got in the way, and my priorities were co-opted for a short period of time. But anyway, here we are. And today we're going to do the breakfast recipe that I promised you. This easy recipe that will keep in the refrigerator for a week at least, maybe more. And it will is easy to reheat in the microwave or the air fryer, or it's even delicious cold straight out of the fridge. And it's going to be basically eggs and sausage in a handheld sort of a situation. And a lot of people go, oh yeah, egg cups. No, I don't like egg cups. And the reason why I don't like egg cups is because it is very difficult to get your muffin cups seasoned and greased properly so that the eggs don't stick. And it just really irritates the crap out of me to have to dig my egg cups out of the muffin cups one at a time. So this is an equivalent to egg cups, but I make it in a square cake pan because it's, number one, it's easy to get out and you can cut it up very, very easily into whatever portion sizes you want. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just a totally much easier, more convenient way of doing things. Okay, so if you want to put this in muffin cups, this mixture in muffin cups, you absolutely go right ahead. Nah, not me. It's a pain in my behind, and I don't like it and I don't want to do it. Okay, so anyway, let's get started with our hardware. Here I have an 8-inch square cake pan. You can use a 9-inch cake pan, which is also a common size. The casserole, so to speak, will be thinner and will take a little bit less time to bake. Just be aware of that. And I fitted it with a cut-to-fit sheet of baking parchment. And what I have done is I have taken my handy pastry brush and my container of harvested tallow, brushed the bottom of the baking dish really well with the tallow, and then pressed the cut-to-fit sheet of parchment into the bottom. And then I have also greased the top of the parchment sheet and the sides of the baking pan. Now, keep in mind, this does not mean the eggs will not stick to the sides of the baking pan. They very well might, but with the flat sides of the baking pan, it's real easy to run a plastic knife around there and get it loose. And the parchment will prevent the bottom from sticking. And now we will also need a sheet of aluminum foil that is cut large enough to crimp over the top of our pan. Now, you can double this recipe and put it in a 9x13 sheet cake pan or quarter sheet pan if that's what you want to do if you're making for a lot. So that works really, really well. Okay, next. Sorry about the glare. We have our 1 pound of breakfast sausage that we made, and it is, as you can see, broken up into crumbles pre-cooking because we talked about dry, tough hamburger crumbles, ground beef crumbles caused by overworking the beef. And one of the best ways to prevent that, in my mind, is to crumble it up before you cook it. And also we have got 12 beaten eggs, right? a half a cup mixed with a quarter of a cup, a half a cup of heavy whipping cream and a half a cup of water mixed together. This is a cup total of liquid. Half a cup of water, half a cup of heavy whipping cream. That is going to keep our egg cake moist and keep it from drying out too much and getting too tough. We have 4 ounces, maybe a little bit more than that, of shredded cheese. You can use whatever kind you want. This happens to be queso fresco because that's what I had. But Monterey Jack, taco blend, cheddar, Swiss, provolone, mozzarella, any kind of cheese that you like, you can use here. It all will work. We have about 1/3 to a half a cup of minced onions. You can leave this out if you're not doing veggies, okay? And we have also 2 tablespoons of minced parsley. I just love fresh minced parsley. Again, if you're not doing veggies, you just go ahead and leave this right out and you're fine. Also, salt and pepper to taste. I love to use freshly ground pepper. This is actually, interestingly enough, a pill grinder, but it works awesomely well for grinding black pepper. Because I like the fact that you don't have to do it like this. It's got like a old-fashioned coffee grinder style crank. And I've put this little rubber band around it because it's a little bit slippery so I can grab it. This is way easier to use than the kind that you have to twist your wrists. That just, I already have issues with my wrists. So, and of course, my Himalayan salt. You use whatever kind of salt you want. So, now, we are going to get started. Let me move over here a little bit. Here we go. Adjust. There we go. Here we have my brand new induction cooktop so that you can see what I'm doing rather than looking at everything off to the side on my stove, which is, it's a real convenient place in my kitchen for my stove, but it's terrible to try to work with. Function. I'm still getting used to this. We're going to turn this up so it gets nice and hot. There we go. And temperature, there we go, 400 degrees. Now I've got a little bit of tallow to lubricate the pan, warming up. And this induction top gets hot real fast. It doesn't like it when you pick the pan up off the stovetop, I have learned. It also doesn't like it when you heat the pan empty. So I haven't used this very much, so bear with me. So we're going to put about half of our meat in the pan just because I don't want to overcrowd the pan. Partly because I want this to cook very quickly. And partly because if the ground beef cooks at too low a temperature, it sheds its liquid before it can brown. And that, again, will make things dry. So when I'm browning ground beef or cooking ground beef on the stove, I am breaking it up a little bit, as you can tell, but I generally just like to let it sit. Just let it sit. Don't start messing it up and moving it around, because that is just about the surest way to make sure you don't get any sear. And I like the sear. I think it gives excellent flavor to your finished dish. So when you put it in, just leave it alone. Pork, will withstand being tossed around and messed around in the pan. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but ground pork just seems to me to be sturdier. I don't know why it is that ground beef seems to be more fragile, but it seems way more susceptible to becoming dry and tough when it's made into crumbles like this than pork does. So just let it be for a few minutes. And you'll see that it is cooking from the bottom up. You don't need to toss this around. And the other thing is, most recipes will tell you cook it till it's no longer pink. That is completely unnecessary. And I will tell you why in just a minute. Well, first of all, it's because I don't find grocery store ground beef to be particularly dangerous. I've been eating it rare and even raw for probably about 3 years now. Have never had anything even remotely resembling foodborne illness because of it. So if it makes you nervous, or if you have a suppressed immune system, perhaps that's not for you. But if you have an ordinarily active immune system and you don't find yourself getting sick very often, I would say you're probably just fine. Now you'll see the smaller ones are completely cooked and the larger ones are still a little bit pink on top. And it has a nice sear on the bottom. And I am going to, at this point, remove it from the pan. Back into my bowl. It's okay to mix the cooked meat and the uncooked meat in the same bowl for this time, because it's going to go back in the oven and cook some more. Yes, it doesn't like it when I lift the pan off the heat. So that's why it's beeping at me. Now, we're going to put the rest of the uncooked meat in the pan. If there's any big chunks that you missed when you were crumbling it previously, just go ahead and break it up now. I'm just doing this in 2 stages because I don't have a pan that I feel is big enough to do this in one stage. If you don't really care much whether you get any sear on the meat, you just want it to be par cooked, then you can just put the whole load in there if you want to. But I really like the sear. I'm going to rinse off my fingers a little bit, get the grease off of them. And let this cook a little bit more. You really do not need to stir this or turn this, because as you put the hot meat back into the bowl, the carryover cooking is going to finish cooking whatever pink parts are left. All you're doing when you cook it till all the pink is gone, all you're doing is overcooking your meat. Now, recipes will tell you to do this because, very frankly, they're covering their asses, right? They don't want to publish something that could possibly result in somebody getting sick. So I'm going to tell you right now, if this makes you nervous, you cook it as well done as you want to. But if you eat your hamburgers rare, if you eat your steaks rare, the probability that this is going to bother you by cooking this the way I'm telling you to cook it is really, really small. Although, keep in mind, I am not a nutritionist and I am not a doctor. So you take that for what it's worth. I'm telling you what I do, and I'm telling you it has never, ever made me sick. It has never made anybody that I cook for sick. It has never made any member of my family sick. Okay? So now you can see there's some sear on this. That's enough. That's done. So we're going to turn our stove off so it won't beep at us while the pan is off the stove. Now we do have some fat gathered in the bottom of the pan. This is 80/20 ground beef, by the way. So there is some fat left in there. And there's some really good yummy fond or drippings in there. So we're going to pour our drippings into our dripping jar. And when you're pouring fat directly from the pan into the jar, make sure you just use a napkin to wipe off the side of the pan, because the fat will drip down the side of the pan almost invariably. There's no way you can avoid it. And then when you put it back on your cooktop, you're going to have smoke. So just be aware of that. I'm going to wipe the splatters off my cooktop here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put about 3 or 4 tablespoons of water in my pan and turn it back on. And I'm going to deglaze the pan, because this brown stuff in the bottom of the pan is delicious, and it is a shame to waste it. So we just put about 3 or 4 tablespoons of water in here. And as it gets hot, we're going to stir around and just scoop up all of that delicious, yummy brownness in the bottom of the pan. All of that is flavor. Folks, if you ever wonder why somebody cooking the exact same recipe might have a difference in the intensity of flavor in a recipe, or why somebody else apparently makes the same recipe and then you try the same recipe and it just doesn't taste the same, this could be part of it. So anytime I brown meat, I call this meat tea, actually. Whenever I brown meat, even if I'm not going to use it for a pan sauce, I almost always save it, and I put it in a jar in my refrigerator so that the next time I am going to make a sauce or a gravy, yeah, there it goes. It's not happy when I take the pan off the heat. So that the next time when I make a sauce or a gravy, I have this incredibly intense flavor. Okay, that's enough. It's reduced down to maybe a little bit more than a tablespoon. And I'm just going to pour it back into my pan of meat. And I am going to wipe off the edge of the pan. Anytime you pour something directly out of the pan and you're going to be putting your pan back on the stove, wipe off the side of your pan. Okay? There we go. And you can see now that there is no pink left in this meat. There was pink in it when we took it out of the pan. There is no pink left because the carryover cooking has finished cooking the meat, and there's no chance of it drying out from being overheated doing that. So our beef is done. Now, you can just mix all of the stuff up together at this point and throw it in the baking pan and have done with it. And stick it in the oven, which is heated to 350 degrees, by the way. But what I like to do is I like to warm the eggs in the skillet for a little while before we mix the ground beef in with it. And the reason why I like to do that is because the eggs will thicken and it will, the beef or the sausage will be suspended in the egg. You won't have like, if you just mix everything up loose and pour it in, you'll have a layer of where all the beef has sunk to the bottom, and then you'll have a layer of egg and onion and parsley on the top, which, I mean, if that doesn't bother you, that's fine. But if you do it this way, number one, the whole casserole will cook a lot faster in the oven, and number two, you'll have all the ingredients will be dispersed evenly through the mass of the egg. And I'm going to put this on. I'm going to lower the heat a little bit. I'm going to lower the heat to 300 because I don't want this to get hot real fast. Oops, I forgot to put my cream, the cream and the water in. That's okay, because we're going to be whisking it quite a bit, so it'll get mixed. And now we're going to be just mixing and whisking this, because this is going to begin to thicken. This 1 cup of liquid is going to be enough to help keep the egg mass in the casserole tender, but it's not going to keep it silky like a quiche. This is more of a frittata. But the extra fluid and the extra fat from the cream is going to help keep your egg mass from becoming too dense, which that can be unpleasant, honestly. I have had overbaked egg cups, and, you know, I just really don't care for them. They can get super, super eggy tasting, and they can get an unpleasant texture. So I find that a cup of liquid with 12 eggs, these were extra large eggs, by the way. A cup of liquid with 12 eggs. Okay, I don't know if you can see this, but the egg is starting to coagulate just a little bit, so I can see little chunks in it. But we're going to keep stirring it and stirring it over medium-low heat. And we're just going to keep doing this until the eggs are probably about 1/3 of the way to halfway cooked. You'll see it'll start to get porridge-like. Kind of like when we did our carnivore shrimp and grits, quote. It's going to start to thicken up and get porridgey like that. See, I am going to lower the temperature to about 250 because the hotter the eggs get, the faster they cook. Keep that in mind. The higher the heat, the faster they cook. And you don't want to go fast because you want to be in control of the texture of these eggs. And be careful that you don't slosh. You know, if this is just too much of an extra step for you, like I said, the basic difference for this is just because I want my ingredients to be evenly distributed. And I want my sausage to be, and my veggies to be evenly suspended throughout the mass of the casserole. But if you don't mind it being in layers and you don't mind cooking it longer, you know, you can just skip this step. But I think it's worth the effort. Okay, looks like we are almost there. There's lots of little tiny curds in the fluid of the egg, and it's beginning to thicken up, and we are almost done. Just a little bit more. Sometimes eggs can get frustrating because you get to the point where you think they're almost done, and then they just kind of stay at that stage for an annoying period of time, and then all of a sudden they tighten up some. I think that's what's happening here. That's what eggs do when you're cooking them on low temperatures. They just seem like they're not doing anything for an annoyingly long period of time. And all of a sudden, within about 10 or 15 seconds, they change from what they were to the next stage. Okay, here we go. We're just about there, I think. I think I see the change beginning to happen. Yeah, here we go. You can tell by the way the whisk is moving through the egg mass that it's thickened up, tightened up a lot just in the past 5 seconds or so. Okay, so this is approaching the consistency of like thin pancake batter, and that's fine. And you want to keep whisking as vigorously as you can without sloshing because, you know, you want to break up all those curds. Okay, here we go. We're there. It's about the thickness of a crepe batter. Okay, now I'm going to move over. We're going to put our onions, whoops, our parsley, keep in mind that as long as the eggs are in this hot pan, they're going to continue cooking. So until you get ready to pour, just keep going back to whisk. All right, here we go. Here is where we add our salt to taste. And remember, the sausage has already been salted, so keep that in mind. And some more freshly ground black pepper. About 5 or 6 turns. But you use as much as you like. Okay. Now you can see that the sausage is not all sinking to the bottom. It's somewhat suspended in the thickened egg. And this is nice and hot, so we got a good head start to our cooking. Our oven is preheated, as I said, to 350 degrees. You might have to scooch the sausage around a little bit. That's okay. If it bunches up in one spot, sometimes that happens. Just stick your spatula in there and move it around till it's looks even where you like it. Now, we are going to actually, just to be safe, it's actually safe to lay my aluminum foil sheet down on top of this cooktop because it won't heat because it's induction, and aluminum is not magnetic, so it's safe to set this down on top of here. I'm greasing the top, the underside of the aluminum with the melted fat because I don't want it to stick to the top of my casserole here. Now, you can do this without covering the casserole, but it will cook a lot faster covered. Just keep in mind how full your pan is when you move it to your oven. And we are going to be moving over to our oven. We're putting it on the center rack. And we're going to let it cook for 10 minutes at 350. Okay, my friends, there we are. So we're going to wait for 10 minutes, and then we're going to go back in and we're going to check and make sure it's done enough. Okay, I'll be back with you in about 10 minutes. So, friends, as is the way of eggs sometimes, I didn't get them quite as hot as I thought I had, and I checked them after 10 minutes and they weren't anywhere near done. It has taken a total of about 20 minutes, but that's kind of the way eggs work. They get cooked when they get cooked. So I would suggest that you just check your eggs after 10 minutes, and if they're still really underdone, set it for another 10 minutes. If they're only a little bit left to do, set it for another 5 minutes and check them, because that's just kind of the way eggs are. They just cook as they cook. The lower you cook them, the better the texture is, but the longer they take. So what we're going to do now, before we unwrap these, is we are going to change our oven from bake to broil. Excuse me, let me get this glary window out of the view. There we go. So we'll put the oven on broil on high, and we have our oven rack set to the, you can't see it, but I've got my oven rack set to the highest level under the broiler. And now we're going to look at our eggs. See, they did raise up a little bit on the outside, but that's okay. A little bit of condensation from the foil accumulated in the middle. You can just leave that there if you want to, but for our next step, we're going to, This pan did get a little bit overfilled. But, you know, stuff happens. Just go with it. Nobody needs to know but you. Now, we have our 4 ounces of queso quesadilla, which, as I said, can be any kind of cheese you want. But we're going to spread this out on top of our eggs. And the eggs are still nice and hot, so it is going to start to melt by itself. But the next step is what makes this dish, I just think, just so yummy and so delicious and so extra special. We're not just going to melt the cheese on top of this. We are going to broil it, and it is going to become a crispy, delicious crust on top of this. This happened to me by accident. A little while ago, I was making this same thing when usually I just melt the cheese on top under the broiler, but I got distracted and I had a holy crap moment, and I ran back in here afraid that I had just roached the top of my casserole. And it turned out that it wasn't burnt. It was very, very brown, but the whole top had turned into this incredible, crispy, crunchy crust that was just so delicious that ever since then, that's how I make it now, because my husband and I just loved it so much. I just love those happy accidents. So we're going to put this back in the oven. It's technically still, nope, it's preheated. So since it was already hot to begin with, it heated up really good. Boy, that window is really annoying. So here we go, back in the oven, under the broiler on the very, very top shelf, as close as you can get it to your broiler. Ouch. What is going on back here? There we go. Okay, so I'm going to leave the oven door open a little bit so that I can watch it. And I'm going to pause the video again because I really don't know how long this is going to take. I'm going to tell you, you have to watch it because it depends. How long it takes depends on how hot your particular broiler is, how much cheese you've put on top of your casserole, and how hot the casserole is underneath the cheese. So you just kind of have to watch it. It shouldn't take more than about 5 minutes, but I'm going to pause the video and then I'll tell you how long it took when I come back. And there it is, my precious friends. You can hear how crispy it is. It's delicious. This took, in my broiler, turned up to high, with my oven already preheated from the baking, it only took about 4 minutes to do this. So it's really not that onerous of a task to sit and watch it. You really do need to leave your oven open a crack and watch it, because it can go from this brown deliciousness to completely charred black and inedible in literally less than a minute. So here we go. Now I'm going to loosen. So I have my plastic knife. I always use a plastic knife with my nonstick bakeware because I don't want to score I just keep a supply of these. This is a plastic steak knife. Not that it's much good for steak, but it's good for other things. Now, once you've got the sides loosened, the bottom, of course, will be kept loose by the parchment paper. Now, you can cut this in 4 or 6 pieces. If you're cutting it in 4 pieces, you already know you're going to have 3 eggs and 4 ounces of sausage per portion. If you're going to cut it into 6ths, you're going to have 2 eggs and a little bit less than 3 ounces, 2.5 or so ounces of sausage per person. That's just if you're tracking these things. So I'm going to cut mine into 4ths, which is usually what I do. Oh, you can hear the crispiness. And you see the knife comes out completely clean. That means that the eggs are all the way done. And let's serve. Slide underneath here. Look at this. It's so big and fat and thick and juicy. Like I said, you can make this in a little bit bigger of a pan, and it'll not be as thick. But I just think that looks so delicious. You can cut this in smaller squares. You could cut this in 1/8. Cut each of these in half. You could cut it even in smaller squares. You could cut it in 1/16, sort of like this. And then they would be somewhat the same size as egg bites, maybe a little bit smaller. And you can see how this would be completely handy once it was cool enough to handle, to toss in a box, a container, to grab it with your hand once it was room temperature. These are delicious at room temperature. They're delicious hot right out of the oven. They're delicious right out of the fridge. They reheat in the air fryer in just a few minutes. You have to experiment with your own air fryer to learn exactly how long to do. But I'm gonna take a bite. It's really hot though. The cheese is crispy on top, but it's still stretchy and gooey underneath. The beef sausage is really flavorful, and it's also tender. A little piece. And it's not tough, and the eggs are tender. They're juicy. But they're holding together really well, even when they're super hot. So here you go, as I promised. Convenient. And I promise you, this will keep in your refrigerator for at least a week, if it lasts that long, if it doesn't get eaten up. So make a big batch, double the batch, and put it in a 9x12 quarter sheet pan. Make a couple of square pans cooked separately. Change up the cheese. If you're doing ketovore, you can add a little bit of whatever kind of vegetable to it that you want. You can put some mushrooms in it. You can put some spinach in it if you like spinach. You can put a little bit, it's delicious with some sun-dried tomato, or you can put, instead of sausage, you could put ham and cheddar cheese and a little bit of diced bell pepper in there and make Denver style, omelet style. You can just do whatever you want, but this is way more convenient in my mind than egg cups, and keeps really great, convenient, reheats well, good straight up cold, as I said. Anyway, that's all for today, precious friends. I hope you enjoy this recipe. I hope you make it for yourself. I hope you do a riff on it. If you make it and you change it up, let me know how it goes. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. Until we talk again, I wish you peace, love, and meat. Bye-bye.